Hi guys, it's me, ChazzaHD, and welcome back to the channel. First time I've been doing some content in about a month, I think. Last time I spoke to you guys, it was for qualifying in Monaco, which of course was a very exciting day about a month ago. And it looks like we're in for an even more exciting day today, where we have got at least four drivers, and probably you could say at least four teams able to fight today for pole position. It's going to be possibly the most exciting qualifying session we've ever had at this track. Obviously, the shorter lap does help, making things closer, but it is insanely close between Ferrari, Red Bull, McLaren, and Mercedes. And that's exactly how we want it in Formula One. And yeah, things are looking very exciting indeed. Of course, in this build up to qualifying, we'll go through all the data to show why it is possible that those four teams, any of those four teams, could end up in pole position. But of course, there was a Grand Prix a couple of weeks ago in Canada. I will share my thoughts on that Grand Prix soon enough. And just to clarify again, yeah, the reason I didn't do any streaming for the Canadian Grand Prix was because my keyboard was broken. Now, I know a couple of people were saying, "Oh, you've accidentally spilled a drink on your keyboard, and that's what's happened." It wasn't that. It was, a couple of the keys were stuck because of, I think, like a couple crumbs here or there from food I had ate. But most of the keys that were not working, which was a good portion of the keyboard itself, they just weren't working at all. There was no reason for them not to work. There was no, they were pressing down absolutely fine, but when you pressed them, they just didn't do anything. There was no response. So yeah, I had to get a new keyboard, and unfortunately, I had to wait until the day after the Canadian Grand Prix to get that new keyboard. But yeah, that problem thankfully now is solved, and it's a shame that that issue happened because I would have been live for both qualifying and the race if it had not been for that issue. And yeah, what a Canadian Grand Prix we had a couple weeks ago. One of the best race weekends we've had for a couple years. But yeah, let's hope this weekend continues on that sort of form in terms of exciting racing and just competitiveness through the field. But yeah, I think today is going to be definitely an exciting day in Spain. So hopefully we get that, and hopefully you guys can join me, of course, in watching along today's session. And yeah, for the next hour and a half, we're going to be building up to qualifying, then getting into the session itself, and then of course we'll be doing a bit of a reaction after the session. Hope you guys are well. I haven't obviously spoke to you guys in a month. I hope you're all doing well. I hope everything's going well in your part of the world, and there's no big issues. And no matter what time zone you're in, what part of the world you're from, I hope right now everything is all good. And like I said, I hope you can join me today in watching along, and most importantly, enjoying qualifying in Spain. But one last thing, actually, before we get on to the Canadian Grand Prix quickly. Of course, as usual, there is a poll running at the top of the live chat. Let me know who you think will take pole position in Spain today. Will it be Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, George Russell, or Lewis Hamilton? I could have put more options there because, yeah, we've got, I think, possibly maybe even 5 or 6 drivers that could possibly take pole today. So yeah, let me know out of that that group of drivers who you think is most likely to take pole position. And of course, I'll leave that poll running for the next couple hours or so you guys can get your votes in. But let's just quickly touch on the Canadian Grand Prix. And yeah, it was a wet and wild weekend in Montreal. Qualifying was very, very exciting. We had Mercedes showing stunning pace, which it was a bit to do with, I think, the track suiting them a bit more, but also their front wing upgrade that they brought to Montreal clearly made their car quite a bit better. And that's why Mercedes are now suddenly fighting with McLaren, Ferrari, and to a degree, Red Bull as well. So that is great to see, and hopefully they can continue improving as the season goes on. But yeah, Mercedes ended up on pole by, well, nothing compared to Max Verstappen. They set the same lap time in qualifying, but Russell ended up on pole because he did the lap time first. And we had, I think, the top four separated by, was it 10th of a second? Which, again, could you really have it any more perfect than that? That's pretty much how we would like it. And again, that's what we could see today. And let's hope we do get that. But yeah, the race itself, I going into it, I didn't have the biggest hopes because I thought with the wet weather and these cars not really handling that well in the wet, I didn't have the greatest expectations. But with it constantly, raining and then stopping and then raining again and stopping, it was the perfect weather really for what was a brilliant Grand Prix. It was fantastic. The fight between the top four, Russell, Verstappen, Norris, and Piastri, was brilliant. You didn't really know who was going to win until probably the last 15 laps or 10 laps, you could say, is when it looked like Max was going to win. And of course, he did end up winning the Grand Prix. But yeah, it was a brilliant Grand Prix all the way through the field. There was some, amazing overtaking. Alex Albon, of course, that double overtake he did down the back straight and into the chicane. And just a fantastic race. And I would have to say, since the ground effect era began in 2022, I think this was arguably the Canadian Grand Prix. This was arguably the best race we've had since the ground effect era began at the start of 2022. The only other race I can think of that could rival it is Silverstone in 2022, because the last 15 laps of that race were just exhilarating. So maybe you could say that was better, but if not that Grand Prix, then I think, the Canadian Grand Prix of 2 weeks ago is the best race we've had in, probably 2.5 years. And it was well overdue to have a race of that quality. Some brilliant driving from some of the drivers. And it was, as I said, I think a few moments ago, you didn't know what was going to happen and who was going to finish where until really that last 10, 15 laps. And in terms of who was going to finish on the podium, you didn't know really until the last lap. That's how we want things to be in Formula One. We don't want it to be, decided pretty much by lap 5 or even lap 1. That's not how we want it to be. So, great to see what we saw in Canada. Again, it's a shame I wasn't able to stream because I would have loved it. And I know you guys would have loved tuning into the stream for my commentary for the Canadian Grand Prix. It would have been so fun, but that's the way things are. I'm sure with how close things are, though, that we will get more exciting races going forward for the rest of the season, because with the top 4 teams being this close, you can't imagine we're going to get too many boring races. It's quite hard for that to happen when the teams are so close. So fingers crossed. Obviously, we're now beginning a triple header. This week we're in Spain. Next week we're at the Red Bull Ring in Austria, and then a week after is the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. I think we could be in for a very exciting triple header here in 2024. But brilliant Canadian Grand Prix, and let's have a look at what the championship standings are coming out of that Canadian Grand Prix. So Max Verstappen now has a really clear lead in the Drivers' Championship, despite the Red Bull car not being, super quick at the moment. He is, how many points clear? 56 points clear of Charles Leclerc. Ferrari, that's one thing I forgot to mention. How poor were they in Montreal? 11th and 12th in qualifying. I think they were quicker than that in qualifying. They just kind of screwed up with Leclerc towards the end of Q2, but still awful result. And then in the race, couldn't have been any worse. They had no race pace at all with Carlos Sainz, who had a reliable and working Ferrari car. And of course, Leclerc, for most of the race, his car wasn't working properly. So, just awful. And Ferrari have got to respond here if they've got any hope of, winning any sort of championship in 2024. Lando Norris is right behind Leclerc now in third place, only 7 points behind. Once again, another brilliant race weekend from Lando. Carlos Sainz up in fourth place, ahead of Sergio Perez in fifth. Perez has been diabolical in the last couple race weekends. Oscar Piastri in sixth. He's slowly but surely climbing up and getting nearer towards the drivers ahead of him. George Russell in seventh, Lewis Hamilton in eighth. They are starting to get on with it in the driver standings. Fernando Alonso still very impressively in ninth, and still not that far away from the two Mercedes drivers, even though the Mercedes car is so much quicker than the Aston Martin. And then you've got Yuki Tsunoda, 10th in the championship on 19 points. Tsunoda still one of the top few drivers we've seen in 2024. And then on the constructors' side, Red Bull, obviously in the lead, but not really that comfortable. They're only, 49 points clear of Ferrari. And of course, Ferrari at the last Grand Prix didn't score a point. So Red Bull are still not in a comfortable position when it comes to the Constructors' Championship, especially when you've got Sergio Perez, who can't even make Q3. And even when he has a poor qualifying result, can't even climb his way up the field. So, yeah, Red Bull are in a bit of trouble when it comes to the Constructors' Championship. And definitely there is a fight for the Constructors' Championship in 2024. McLaren 40 points behind Ferrari in third. Mercedes still quite far behind the top three in fourth. But, there's plenty of time to gain on that top three. Aston Martin in fifth, 30 points clear of Racing Bulls in sixth. Haas in seventh, Alpine eighth. Alpine continuing to score points in 2024 and look quite a bit stronger this weekend than I expected. So Alpine, they are really the team to watch out for in the second half of 2024. Williams in ninth. Of course, Albon scored a couple points in Canada. And Sauber at the very back. So, that is the championship standings coming out of the Canadian Grand Prix. But let's concentrate now on the Spanish Grand Prix weekend. Of course, we've had practice sessions so far this weekend. Practice 3 finished, just over an hour ago. And we had, I think, Carlos Sainz ending up quickest with Norris second and Leclerc third. And I think, the top 5 separated by a tenth and a half, which is very, very close around a track like this. And again, all 4 teams have I think, definitely a good shout when it comes to pole position. But who is looking the best out of the 4 to get pole position? Well, let's get into that because, of course, practice 2 happened yesterday in brilliant dry conditions. And in terms of the time of day the session happened, it was the most representative session we've had so far. And it was also the session where most drivers were going at their absolute quickest. So let's get on to the practice 2 result. Lewis Hamilton was quickest, only just by a couple hundredths of a second ahead of Carlos Sainz. On a 1:13.2 was Lewis Hamilton the quickest driver. Lando Norris half a tenth back. Pierre Gasly in the Alpine just under 2 tenths off. Now, Alpine are not going to be quite that quick in qualifying, but I think given how quick they were yesterday, I know they weren't super quick in practice 3, but they also were not matching the best lap times they did in practice 2 in practice 3. So I think Alpine were definitely sandbagging a bit in third practice. Alpine, to me, looked like the best of the rest, quite clearly, ahead of, your Racing Bulls, Aston Martin, Sauber, who looked decent this weekend. So, yeah, Alpine are the team to look out for from the midfield pack. Max Verstappen in the Red Bull in P5. I know it doesn't look great, but when you look at the sector time data, it's not as bad as it might seem, what their pace was in practice 2. And, of course, we know Red Bull sandbagged the most on a Friday compared to any other team. So Red Bull have definitely got the pace for pole. Whether they've got the best pace for pole, again, we'll have to see later on. But they're definitely in the fight. There's no doubt about that. Charles Leclerc finished up in 6th, quite far behind his teammate. Was a lot closer, though, in practice 3. We'll get on to Leclerc, by the way, because he committed an awful piece of driving in practice 3, which I think will see him get a grid penalty. We'll get on more to that later on in the build-up here to qualifying. And then you got George Russell 8th. Russell could have gone a lot quicker. He was consistently there, if not quicker, than Lewis Hamilton during practice 2 up until that final good lap. So yeah, Russell can definitely go a lot quicker, so watch out for him. Esteban Ocon was 9th, and then Valtteri Bottas, very impressively, P10 in the Sauber, which of course is consistently one of the worst cars on the grid. And then the bottom half of the order, the 2 Haas's, decent enough, 11th and 12th. Perez 13th, he just looks hopeless at the moment. Alonso 14th, Aston Martin look like with every upgrade they're going even further backwards. Tsunoda 15th, Ricciardo 16th. As we'll get into later, they've brought a lot of upgrades here, and I don't think they've fully unleashed what they have, so we'll see what they've got later. Zhou Guanyu 17th, once again, no surprise, Zhou massively off the pace, and then Lance Stroll in 18th, Alex Albon 19th, Logan Sargent 20th. Williams clearly have the slowest car this weekend, which is not necessarily a surprise, but it is maybe a surprise they're that far behind everybody else, put it that way. Maybe they can get closer in qualifying. But to understand the pace from practice 2 and just in general the pace and how it's looking this weekend, let's get into the sector times. So sector 1, which is the least important sector of the track, where you're flat out, really, except for turn 1. Max Verstappen of the Red Bull and Carlos Sainz of the Ferrari pretty much equal through that sector. No real surprise there. Mercedes, pretty decent in Sector 1. McLaren as well, decent enough. Haas, looking good. No surprise there. And really no surprise at all about the pace of the team through the first sector. Maybe you could say Williams probably could have been a bit quicker in the first sector, maybe a 10th or so quicker. But really, that top 10 in the first sector is how you would expect it, given that you're flat out, except for the first corner. The second sector, though, is probably the most important part of the circuit, and McLaren, no real surprise, given how good their car is through medium and high-speed corners, were the best team through there. Half a tenth quicker than the Mercedes, and a 10th quicker than the Ferrari. Alpine, very good through the middle sector, just under 2 tenths behind. Sauber, pretty good as well. Still quite far off McLaren, but to be, nearly a 10th ahead of Aston Martin in the middle sector is, again, very impressive. Red Bull, though, were struggling quite a bit. Max had some issues with the car. The rear end yesterday snapping a bit, and also a bit too much understeer in the car, which I think they may have solved for today. They better hope they have. So yeah, that is really the sector where Red Bull need to focus on making sure that their pace is good, because if they're, this far off in qualifying in the middle sector, no chance they'll be on pole position. Absolutely no chance. So yeah, Red Bull, I think, definitely could go a lot better through this part of the track. Haas in 8th, Racing Bulls 9th, definitely would have expected more of Racing Bulls in this part of the track. Would have expected them to be, really, I'd say a quarter of a second at least quicker through this part of the track. And then Williams, way, way far behind, almost a second slower than McLaren. And 4 tenths of a second almost slower than Racing Bulls, the next team ahead of them. So yeah, very poor pace from the Williams. And then the final sector really is about those final 2 high-speed corners. And very impressive, the speed for the Alpine, which does show that despite maybe some weight issues and issues with the power unit not being quite powerful enough. Aerodynamically, their car is performing at a very good level right now. No doubt about it. They just need to keep improving and things will continuously get better for them. So yeah, really good signs for Alpine. Of course, they're not going to be the best team in the final sector in qualifying. That would be just incredible if they were. But yeah, it does show that their car, aerodynamically speaking, is very, very good when it comes to that midfield pack. Mercedes also very good in the final sector. Red Bull could go probably half a tenth or so quicker, but they're not that far off what they could do at their absolute best. McLaren, though, in fourth, I think definitely have quite a bit of lap time to find because we know in high speed corners how good their car is. So you would expect McLaren to be pretty much the quickest team in the final sector. So this is really the only part of the track where I think McLaren can find improvement is the final sector. If they can find, say, an extra tenth or so, that could be the difference between qualifying third or putting it on pole, or even qualifying fourth and putting it on pole. So they've got to make sure they get that final sector right because it definitely is a crucial end to the lap. Ferrari, I've got to say, not too great at all in that final sector, which is a bit of a concern. I mean, their pace overall does look better than expected because I thought they'd be clearly slower than Red Bull and McLaren around this track in qualifying trim. But with their upgrades they've brought, they're definitely have improved from what I've seen so far compared to what my expectation was. So that's good to see from the Ferrari team. Haas, pretty decent. Racing Bulls, again, I think can do better. I think maybe a tenth and a half better they can do in the final sector. Sauber dropping off a bit. Aston Martin, very poor in the final sector, almost as slow as the Williams team. So coming out of practice 2, it is very hard to say who has the best car. And that's absolutely how we want it to be. Coming into the weekend, I thought Red Bull and McLaren had the two, say, best chances of getting pole out of, any team or any teams. I thought, again, coming into the weekend, I thought Ferrari would be lacking a bit too much through the high-speed corners to really be able to get the job done. And Mercedes, I thought, would be strong, but again, I didn't think they would be quite, fighting for pole position level strong around this track because I thought this track would not suit their car as well as the, Circuit de Gilles Villeneuve in Montreal did. So, yeah, trying to predict what the pecking order is, I think for the top 4 teams, I think it's impossible. I really do, because, you got George Russell in 8th, who normally is quicker than Hamilton in 2024, so who knows how quick Russell can go when he's at his absolute best. Can Leclerc do even better than Sainz? We'll have to see. Can McLaren find a bit more pace? Maybe. And Red Bull, we know, compared to practice 2, will go quicker compared to their rivals. So they're all kind of meeting in the same place. So, yeah, for the top 4 teams, I can't say where they are. I honestly can't. It's way too close. I think, honestly, the top 4 teams are separated by a tenth at most around this track in qualifying trim. When it comes to race trim, I think the gap is quite a bit bigger. But in qualifying trim, they're all basically on the same pace, and it's all going to come down, really, to the drivers, I think, in qualifying, which is, again, exactly how we want it to be. But after that, I'd say 5th best team, definitely Alpine. I think they're definitely best of the rest. And then, after that, I'd probably say I'd probably go Sauber 6th. I've been impressed with them so far. Show some good pace with Valtteri Bottas. And then 7th and 8th and 9th, you've got what? Teams like Aston Martin, Racing Bulls, and Haas. I still think Racing Bulls have got more pace to show. So I'm going to go Racing Bulls in 7th, and then Aston Martin 8th, Haas 9th, and then Williams clearly in P10. But with those positions, even, 7th, 8th, and 9th best team, they could be completely different to what I've just said. It's very hard to say where most of the teams are this weekend. But again, the only things we do know, I think for sure, is Williams have the worst car and Alpine are best of the rest. When it comes to everyone else, we'll see. We'll see what happens in qualifying. But like I said, for the next hour or so, and going through qualifying as well, let me know what your predictions for pole position are, and what your predictions are in general when it comes to qualifying. Let me now give my predictions for qualifying, and of course, my usual top 10 prediction. And let's get into it. And of course, I've done the gaps that I think it will be throughout the field. Max Verstappen, I think, barely by, as you can see, 0.01 of a second, will get pole position. Purely because Max has the consistency in qualifying, I think, over others, to get the job done. But again, it could be Norris, it could be Russell, it could be Sainz. Any of them really could get pole position. But I'm going to go Max Verstappen just about ahead of Lando Norris in second. George Russell third, half a tenth off I think he'll be in the end. Carlos Sainz I'm going to go in fourth. Lewis Hamilton fifth. Charles Leclerc sixth. Oscar Piastri has been struggling a bit this weekend compared to his teammates, so that's why I've gone with him in P7. And then Pierre Gasly 8th, Esteban Ocon in 9th, and Valtteri Bottas in P10. Let me know what you think of my prediction, and again, let me know your prediction, your top 3, top 5, top 10. Let me know in the live chat, and I'll make sure to get to your comments very soon, as I'm going to be coming to you guys in the chat in a few moments or so. Make sure, by the way, to keep smashing the like button if you haven't already. We are on, 21 likes. Let's try and get up to 25 plus if we can in the next few minutes. But another thing I want to get onto is upgrades, because, of course, coming to this track, upgrades are very important. And we haven't really had, a lot of the teams at the same time bring upgrades since, Imola? I know, of course, Mercedes had the new front wing, which, according to Red Bull, is a flexible front wing. Whether that's true, I have no idea. Innocent till proven guilty, I'll say on that one. So, yeah, other than that, we haven't really had a discussion about upgrades since Imola. So let's get into some of the big upgrades here for the Spanish Grand Prix. The Red Bull, not really a big upgrade package for them, but just a new beam wing, a new rear wing end plate. That would probably only give them, I think, a tenth of a second at most around a track like this. So they pretty much got the same car as before. Aston Martin have got a new front suspension and a new front and rear corner. But as we have seen with Aston Martin this season, they just keep getting worse. With the Grand Prix a couple of weeks ago in Montreal, I think the only reason they were a bit stronger there is because I think in the slow corners, they've still got a pretty good car where, in the slower corners, you need to rely more on the mechanical grip of the car, which again is very good in the Aston Martin. It's just the aerodynamic grip is just not there. And the more upgrades they fit, they just seemingly get worse. And around a track like this, you have to have a very good aerodynamic package, and they don't. So yeah, Aston Martin in quite a bit of trouble. Racing Bulls, as I said, have quite a few upgrades. A new engine cover, side pod inlet, floor body, and a new rear wing. So a big upgrade package for the Racing Bulls team. And coming into this weekend, I was expecting them to be clearly best of the rest, and even maybe getting involved with a couple drivers towards the back end of the, say, front load of drivers, say around the fourth row of the grid. But we haven't seen anything like that so far this weekend. So again, I don't know if they're just collecting information on their upgrades to try and see where they can maximize their pace with the new upgrades. Maybe that's what they're concentrating on so far. But I definitely think there is more pace in that car than what they've shown so far. Whether it's good enough to be, getting both cars into Q3, who knows? I hope they do, because they've been brilliant this season out of the Racing Bulls team. But yeah, I think definitely keep an eye out for them, because, like I said, I think there is more pace there to be found. Ferrari, pretty big upgrade for them. New engine cover, new floor fences, floor body, floor edge, new diffuser, and a new halo. This is their biggest upgrade of the season so far. Of course, they had a big upgrade at Imola, which didn't really work. It only probably gave them maybe half a tenth or a tenth at most. Didn't quite have as much of an effect on the car as they were hoping. But from what I've seen so far in practice, this upgrade looks like it's working. But then again, remember, if we look back to that race at Imola, which was, 5 weeks ago, after practice there, we thought that the upgrade was working for them, that they brought there. But then when it came to qualifying in the race, it turned out that the upgrade had not really made a difference. So we still need to wait for qualifying and the race to really see whether this upgrade truly is working its magic and is doing what it needs to do. I really hope it is, because if Ferrari can improve, going into the next few races compared to where they were before by, say, a quarter of a second, that really could help them maybe grab an extra win or two. And that's what they need if they're going to have any hope of even challenging Red Bull for the Constructors' Championship, never mind the Drivers' Championship with Leclerc against Verstappen. So, yeah, we'll see how that goes for Ferrari. And the final upgrade, Sauber, new rear wing and new front corner. Again, a minor upgrade for them. Seems to be working a bit, but not really going to give them a ton of extra pace, I think, around this circuit. So, we have got just under 1 hour to go until qualifying begins at the Circuit de Catalonia in Montmeló, Spain. And not quite as hot at the moment at the track as it was. It was, quite sunny at the circuit, but the sunshine has gone and it's gone a bit overcast at the track, which might favour certain teams in this qualifying session coming up if it remains that way. But very excited for this session, because when it comes to the front four, maybe not the front four rows, but the top 7 on the grid, it could be really anything. And, one big error could see you falling from a potential pole position down to 7th place or even lower. Even a minor mistake could see you falling from pole to, 5th or 6th. So, yeah, we'll see how that all shakes out once we get to qualifying in just under an hour's time. Couple other things to get into is, a couple incidents in practice 3. One was Stroll and Hamilton having contact, which I don't think Stroll is going to get a penalty for. What happened basically is, going into turn 5, Lewis Hamilton didn't really get out of the way in a good way, and Stroll ran a bit wide to make his point to Hamilton, and then they made slight contact. But I don't think Stroll, in the way he positioned his car, I just don't think he'll get a penalty. I think he'll just get a slap on the wrist for that. But for Leclerc, he absolutely has to get a penalty. What happened with that incident with Norris is, out of turn 5, obviously Leclerc was frustrated that Norris had blocked him a bit. Then Lando into turn, what would it have been, 7 and 8, was going to let him through, and Leclerc overtook him and then slowed down, turned across him and made contact with him. You can't do that. That is extremely poor driving. That's Maldonado-esque driving. obviously sets a horrible example for the younger drivers. So the FIA have got to give Leclerc a penalty, whether it's 3 place, 5 place, I don't care. Give the guy a penalty because that is not on. We'll see whether he does get a penalty. But there's also been, before I move on to you guys in the chat and what you guys are saying, there's also been quite a bit of F1 news since I last spoke to you guys. Of course, the last stream I did was qualifying in Monaco. And of course, we've had, the race in Monaco and then a full race weekend in Canada. Obviously, I've, mentioned my thoughts on the Canadian Grand Prix already, but the Monaco Grand Prix was unbelievably painful to watch. It was like punishment from God, that race. It was so frustratingly shit. And thank the Lord that I decided not to stream for that race because, I thought it would not be good, but it was even worse than I thought possible. We had, 2 overtakes in the race? It was an absolute diabolical Grand Prix. And, one big thing to come out of it, of course, at Alpine, was the Ocon-Gasly crash, where Ocon stupidly, at the final corner before the tunnel, dive-bombed Gasly, and then made contact and almost eliminated both himself and Gasly from the race. And since then, Alpine have decided, fuck you, Esteban, we're moving on, and we're going to replace you with, by the looks of it, either Mick Schumacher or Jack Doohan, who apparently, those 2 drivers, according to Canal Plus, who are the main French broadcaster for Formula 1, according to them, Mick Schumacher, and Jack Doohan will be doing a private test at Paul Ricard in, I don't think it's next week, I think it's the week after. Basically a head-to-head test to see who the better driver is, and obviously whoever wins that will end up getting the seat for next year alongside Pierre Gasly. Does Ocon, deserve to be sacked for what he did? Honestly, yeah, I think he does. And I know, he has, he's been good for Alpine. I'm not going to deny that. He's had a couple podiums for them. He won a race, of course, in Hungary almost 3 years ago now. He has been good for the Alpine team, but when you are a team like Alpine and you're in a part of the grid where they are at, you cannot trust a driver like Esteban Ocon because he will, at some point, have a moment or a collision, whatever you want to call it, with his teammate. And what he did in Monaco, I think absolutely was a sackable offence. It was so unbelievably stupid. And I think rightfully is getting dropped for that. And I know people may say, oh, well, Ocon this season has been better than Gasly. Yeah, he has, but that doesn't give you the right to do what he did. Plus, just because Ocon so far this season has been better than Gasly doesn't mean that's going to continue. Remember, last season, Ocon was better than Gasly for the first, 8, 9 races. And then from the middle of the season, where, let's say, the British Grand Prix on, Gasly was clearly the better driver. So it's not like they're losing anything from letting Ocon go, because they've got Pierre Gasly, who is the same level and maybe you could argue has a higher ceiling than Ocon. So yeah, I think it's the right decision, and hopefully Ocon losing his seat pretty much because of what happened in Monaco, hopefully that sends a message to him going forward, and whoever he drives for next year, whether it's Haas or, I don't know, Sauber or whoever, hopefully in the future he'll be a lot more intelligent when it comes to racing and just racing his teammate, and will be less volatile when it comes to racing his teammate in the future. Because, again, for those midfield teams, you can't afford to be doing that. I mean, we look at Force India when he was there. He cost the team a potential 1-2 finish in Baku, did Ocon, by slamming his teammate into the wall. If that doesn't happen, and obviously we know what happened with Hamilton and Vettel in that race, Force India probably win the race and, like I said, probably even get a 1-2 finish. That would have been the best result of their team's history. But Ocon put Perez in the wall. So it's not exactly the first time Ocon has cost the team vital points because of his own ego, his own stupidity, and his own selfishness. So, yeah, good decision by Alpine. Good to see them showing a backbone. Also, other news, I think Oliver Behrman has been confirmed that he's going to be racing for Haas next year. No surprise there. We knew about that really towards the end of last season that was going to happen. Also, other news is that the FIA has dropped the age limit for possible F1 drivers to 17, which may as well be renamed the Kimi Antonelli rule, because that's the reason they've done it. So, yeah, Antonelli I'm expecting to be on the grid probably at some point this season. Don't know when exactly, but Antonelli, by the way, has just finished in P10 in the sprint race, which I know you may think, oh, that's awful, but Prema have got a pretty bad car in 2024, so I don't think there's really much Antonelli can do about, about where he's finishing. And obviously his teammate Behrman finished in 21st place in the sprint race today. So if Behrman's good enough for the grid, then Antonelli definitely is, because Antonelli has been clearly better than Behrman in 2024. No doubt about that. Yeah, so Antonelli is going to be on the grid, whether it's next year or this year. We'll have to see. Obviously, though, with the rumours that Carlos Sainz might be going to Williams, it does make things interesting with Antonelli, because, I mean, the assumption was that Antonelli was going to go to Williams and replace Logan Sargent. But at the moment, it looks like we could have a very strong driver lineup at Williams for next year of Carlos Sainz and Alexander Albon. And if that is their driver lineup, then great for Williams. But what does that mean for Antonelli? Does that mean that he will go into the Mercedes car? I think it does, because he is the closest thing they have to Lewis Hamilton in terms of talent. So they may as well throw him in the car, give him a year in the car in 2025 before Mercedes maybe have a championship winning car in 2026. So, yeah, we'll see what happens with that. What other news have we had? Flavio Briatore is back in Formula One as a managing director or something like that at Alpine. Absolutely criminal that he's back in the sport. Shouldn't be allowed to happen. What he was banned from sport for was, a serious case. And like I said, he shouldn't be allowed back in Formula One. And honestly, I think you could say the same for Pat Simmons as well. Because obviously, he played a role in that whole Crashgate thing as well. So yeah, I really don't feel good about all of that. But don't think there's any more F1 news that I need to go through. Well, actually, the only other thing I want to get into quickly before I move on to your comments in the chat is I saw he was, I can't remember what his exact role was. It might have been managing director or promotional director, or I don't know what it was, but he was the director of something at Silverstone, and he was complaining that the reason British Grand Prix tickets are still on sale and they've not sold out has nothing to do with the extortionate ticket prices. No, absolutely no. According to this guy, It's because Red Bull are dominating Formula One. What an absolute fucking joke. It obviously is the ticket prices. I mean, look at me. I have a ticket, a general admission ticket right now for Friday and Saturday for the British Grand Prix, but I can't go because I can't afford everything else. Because when you add in transportation, because I don't drive, by the way, I'd have to catch a train all the way up there, which is quite a long way from Cornwall all the way to the hotel I was going to stay in would have been Milton Keynes. Yeah, it's quite a way, and then obviously you got the hotel stay, food. It's just it's not worth it at the end of the day. That, as we went through on stream about a month ago, if you go on your own to the British Grand Prix and you buy a general admission ticket for 3 days, and then you add in the cost of, again, hotel, transport, food, all that stuff, you're looking at 1,500 quid. That is way too much. Formula One right now is not that valuable to the point where you need to be spending that much money on your own to go to the British Grand Prix, a Formula One event in the UK. It's not the World Cup final. If it was the World Cup final, I'd understand it, but it's not. It's the British Grand Prix. It happens once a year, and at the minute, Formula One is definitely not as exciting as it was 3 years ago, when ticket prices were probably £100 cheaper on average. So, yeah, it's unacceptable, completely unacceptable. And that is the reason why tickets are not selling out like they were maybe last year or the year before, because people can't afford it. I mean, I'm from a working class background, and when it comes to everything that goes with attending the British Grand Prix, the ticket itself, accommodation, transport, food, for a working class person, I don't think it's possible to afford. The only way you can afford to go to the British Grand Prix is if you are on the low end of being in the middle class. And even then, if if you're a low end middle class earner and you take your, let's say, your partner and your 2 kids with you, you're still financially going to be cutting it close. So, they've completely priced out, working class people who, there's plenty of working class Formula One fans who would love to go to the British Grand Prix, but no, they priced them out and the reason I think they priced them out, and I think it's deliberate, is obviously more money and pure greed, but also they want richer people to come to their events, because obviously people with more money are likely to spend more money at the event, whether it's merchandise or for the VIP club, paddock club, whatever the fuck you want to call it. They're likely to spend more money when they're there than we are, being working class, middle class. So that, I think, is a deliberate ploy, really, to price out working class people, because us working class people really can only afford a ticket, maybe a small amount of food at the track, and that's it. I mean, merchandise, let's not even get into all that stuff, because that's an absolute joke as well. So, yeah. And as I said, in case nobody heard before, even though I've got a ticket for Friday and Saturday for the British Grand Prix, I can't go because, like I said, I can't afford to attend. Even though I've already bought and paid for the ticket back, or what was it, all the way back in January, if I end up going, then I'm going to be costing myself probably a few weeks down the road after the British Grand Prix in terms of my finances, and making life a lot harder for myself, and I really don't want to do that. So that's why I'm not going to be going. So, yeah. It's a shame, but tickets, they shouldn't be that expensive for any F1 event. There's no excuse. I mean, the British Grand Prix, I think last year was the 5th highest ticket price on average of all the Grand Prix. Yeah, how come? How is the British Grand Prix more expensive to attend than the Italian or the Monaco Grand Prix? Like, I don't get that. Monza more valuable, more historical than Silverstone. I think they've got more of a reason to charge people more. Obviously, Monaco do. Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, it does make sense to me. I know why they're doing it because greed, but yeah. But yeah, it's such a shame because I was really looking forward to going to Silverstone and watching the cars on track. But yeah, can't do it because it's just way too expensive. And I'm very interested because the British Grand Prix tickets, by the way, start to go on sale every year. I think is it September, October of each year. So obviously the Grand Prix is in a couple weeks' time in July. So once we get to September, October, we'll see if Silverstone get rid of this, bullshit dynamic pricing thing they do, which again is just pure greed. Let's see if they actually listen to the fans and actually decide, you know what, maybe we should drop our prices by maybe 50 quid on average, or maybe more. They won't. They'll just keep charging more. I guarantee it. But let's see. Let's see whether they've got the balls to do it. Good to see Nib in chat saying it's crazy. It seriously would be cheaper for you to come to the Australian Grand Prix than to go to Silverstone. Exactly. I've seen so many people online say that. I think I've seen a few British people say that them attending the Hungarian Grand Prix plus the flight over and even the accommodation is cheaper than the race day at Silverstone ticket, which is like, if you buy a general admission ticket for the race day at Silverstone, you're looking at like is it 400, 500 pounds? How is it possible for there to be that sort of difference? Just not on at all. Again, Formula One, it's a very glamorous sport. It's very well liked. It's a very rich sport. So I'm not under the impression that it's gonna, or it should cost a lot less, but it's got to the point where it is way too much now, way too much. And again, you are having to spend, if you do go, you're having to spend an amount of money that you would be more justifiable if you went to, the World Cup final or something like that, in terms of the amount of money you have to spend overall, not just the ticket, but, the accommodation, food, transport, all of that. It's just a joke. Astro says they charge as much as they think they can get away with and get too greedy and lose out, and everyone loses. Yeah. And, a lot of people do fall for it. I saw someone, though, saying on Twitter, in relation to all this, Silverstone stuff, that what was it, last year, Silverstone only made a profit of, what was it, like 5 million or something? Maybe 10 million? And they were using it as an excuse of, well, they have to do this, even just to make a profit. There are other ways they can make a profit. It's not, they can find other ways than just, than just increasing ticket prices. And, this is the same circuit that has eliminated the chance for you as a spectator to watch the cars through Maggots, Beckett's, and that section of the track, and have now built like a VIP accommodation area that is way too expensive for anyone, really, unless you're super rich, that maybe no one will even spend the money for. So yeah, there's plenty of other ways they can find that money. You know, when it you got the Silverstone Museum there, which I went to back in October for a video. I'm hoping to put out soon. Why not increase the prices of items in there rather than having to increase ticket prices? Why not do that? At least you can say that the items in the museum, like that you can buy, have more value. You could argue than a ticket for the British Grand Prix, because again, the British Grand Prix every season. And yeah, Nib saying this is why Silverstone are hosting the Tories. Exactly. Right. Let's find some other comments here, as we've got not long to go. 35 minutes to go until qualifying is underway in Catalonia. As they're showing a replay of the Leclerc Norris incident, and yeah, Leclerc has got to get a penalty for what he did. Bravamos says way too early for Kimi to get the Burke seat. Maybe. I mean, we'd have to see at the end of the day. You never know. He might be thrown in there, and might be the new Lewis Hamilton. Who knows? The new Max Verstappen, or he might be not ready. Astros, I think LP wants Ocon gone already, but can't do it. Wish they'd find a way. Swap Ocon with somebody, pay him off or something. Not good when you have team and driver hating each other. Well, apparently, the rumor is that Alpine for the Canadian Grand Prix wanted to drop Ocon and put Jack Doohan in the car, but Ocon lawyered up, let's say, and protested at that, and the lawyers said, well, it would be breach of contract, basically. So that's why Ocon is going to remain in the car. But, yeah, he is obviously not going to be in the car next season. Brabham says, I think they have to put Jack, or what's the point of having a junior program? True. I mean, they've also got Victor Martins, who won the sprint race today. I mean, he's another name that maybe they would, think about, but it looks like it's between Mick Schumacher and Jack Doohan. And honestly, I hope Jack Doohan gets a seat, because Mick Schumacher, whilst I think he is maybe good enough for the grid when he's at his best, I think with Mick, honestly, I think he's had his chance. And he just didn't provide enough in his time in Formula One. And I think, when you look at what Jack Doohan has done in Formula 2 and some of the drivers he's competed against, I think Doohan has absolutely earned the opportunity to prove himself. In a similar way to Alex Albon a few years ago, where Albon, in a similar way to Doohan, was not one of the top prospects in Formula 2, did not win the F2 championship, but did well enough to the point where he deserved to have the opportunity to prove himself. And of course, Albon has proven to be absolutely good enough for Formula 1, and a very solid and one of maybe the best midfield drivers on the grid. And I think Doohan, if you go and look at his Formula 2 results, I think he has proven that he deserves the opportunity to prove himself on the biggest stage. Let me just look at his F2. His F2 stats. I think in the championship last year he finished third, was it? Yeah, last year was third. So 2022, he had 3 race wins, finished in 6th. And then last year, didn't start the season well, but was probably the best driver in Formula 2 in the second half of last season, and finished 3rd in the championship and ended up winning 3 feature races in Hungary, Spa, and the final race in Abu Dhabi. And that, by the way, was not for Prema or ART, one of the top Formula 2 teams. That was for Virtuosi, I think is how you pronounce it. Again, sorry if I mispronounced that. But, they're not one of the top F2 teams. So that is very impressive indeed. Plus, in 2021, in Formula 3, he finished second in the championship. Let me see who finished second too. Dennis Hauger. And, finished ahead of drivers like Logan Sargent, Frederick Vesti, who, of course, was very good last year in F2, Victor Martins as well. And then, when you look at 2023, Doohan finished ahead of Iwasa, Martins, Behrman, and was what? He was only 35 points away from winning the championship. So, if he just started the season a bit better, Jack Doohan could have won the championship last year. So, like I said, I think, in a similar way to Alex Albon back in, 2018, 2019, I think Doohan deserves the opportunity to prove whether he is good enough. But before I move on to any other comments, just want to quickly post the link of the stream out one more time before we get into this qualifying session in about half an hour's time. Let me just quickly do that. Come join us here. Watchalong qualifying Spain, where 4 different teams can take pole. So there you go. And hopefully we get a bit more people coming soon enough. Astro's saying, yeah, I hope Doohan gets a drive next year, although Alpine, it just looks ugly now. Team in big trouble. Hopefully they can sort that out. Second, Sainz third, Norris fourth, Leclerc fifth, Danny Rick sixth, Alonso seventh, Lewis eighth, Russell ninth, Bottas 10th. KH says, anyone but Max, not Max hater, just makes things more interesting. It does, but not... For me, it's not just because of Max. It's because Red Bull still have the best... In clear air, in dry conditions, Red Bull still have the best race pace of any team. So, if they get pole, it's going to be pretty hard to stop Red Bull. And by the looks of the long runs from Friday, let me just quickly get them up on my end so I can just have a look at them. Hopefully I can find this. And no, can't at the moment. Let me just have a quick... let me just do something quickly, which I think will allow me to find the data. Hold on. There you go. So, and there was quite a few teams that did their long run on the soft tyre. There was then a couple that did their long run on the medium. But on the medium compound tyre, Red Bull had the best pace. And by the looks of it, over the long run, I would say Red Bull have the best car. Not by a massive gap, maybe a 10th or 2. And then probably McLaren second, Mercedes third, Ferrari fourth. And then looks like Alpine fifth, Aston Martin sixth. So that's what the race pace is looking like. Let me just do something quickly, which I think will allow me to find the data. So, yeah, point being is if you're going to, and I think I said this a few weeks ago, if you're going to beat Red Bull in a race where it obviously matters most, where the points are on offer, you've got to do the job in qualifying. Because if they get pole, unless they have an awful start or you can have an amazing start, then they're going to win. Because again, in clear air, they've got the best driver, obviously, and they've got the best race pace of any team still. They're still, compared to the next best team, a tenth or two better per lap. And that's why they're still easily the championship favourites. That's why Max Verstappen, I mean, we saw in Canada, once it dried out and he got in clear air out front, he pulled the gap because the Red Bull car had the pace, and he ended up winning by, what was it, 2.5, 3 seconds? Because again, in clear air, in dry conditions, the Red Bull was just too quick. So, yeah, if you want to beat Red Bull, beat them in qualifying, and then go from there. And when it comes to, whether I'm going to stream tomorrow, it is really dependent on that, whether Red Bull are on pole or not. If Max does get pole, then I probably won't stream tomorrow. Even though there is a chance of rain tomorrow, I don't actually think it's going to be wet for the race. Let me just have a quick look again at the weather for tomorrow. And yeah, it's gonna be raining in the morning, and then from about lunchtime on, it's gonna be dry. The race starts at 3 p.m. local time, so yeah, the rubber will be washed away from yesterday and today, which may make things a bit interesting, but it's not actually going to be a wet race. It's it's going to be a dry race. It is I have to say though, quite incredible rain in Spain this time of year. Nib saying earlier you hate Aussies, cat. That's why I had to think about your predictions. Hamilton is strong around this track, says Laurie Rastogi. He is, but this hasn't been this season the real Lewis Hamilton, has it? He's been consistently outdone by Russell, who is the main man at Mercedes now. So that's why I've gone Russell ahead of Hamilton in my predictions. Greetings, Chazza, says none that you know. Good to see you, mate. Yanni says Hamilton isn't washed up, more worn out. Laurie says, yeah, I agree. Hamilton has made Russell look slightly better as a result of him being off form, but Russell's results have been fairly consistent at least. Yeah, I mean, Russell, he's been better this season than he was last season, but I will still say with Russell is he is still making some mistakes. We saw in Montreal, for example, where he got up to second, was closing in on Max on the hard tyre, and then he went a bit too deep into, was it turn 8? And then obviously, I think, was it Lando then got past him, and then he just lost all momentum after that and managed to hold on for the podium in the end. But even though Russell has been consistent most of the time this year, again, he still makes, I think, just a bit too many mistakes, which is, I think, really the biggest issue with Russell is that, too many mistakes. Astro saying, please stream tomorrow, Chaz. Again, it all depends on today. Like I said, Red Bull have the best race pace, so if they end up on pole, then I won't be streaming. But if we get any other team on pole, then I will. As I can see Sky F1 doing an interview at the moment with George Russell. Yanni saying, I'll stop sabotaging Hamilton's car for the last race of the season. That brings up a hilarious story that I don't know if you guys have seen online. Race fans posted about it because they actually were included in this email. An anonymous person sent an email to, I think, some journalists and to the Mercedes team, accusing Mercedes of sabotaging Lewis Hamilton's car. And Mercedes have now got the police involved to find out who the person, person is. We know who the person is. It's one of those psychotic Lewis Hamilton fans. One of the absolute psychos on Twitter that cry every minute of the day. One about Abu Dhabi 2021, which, I mean, yeah, it was a travesty, but almost 3 years ago now, still haven't moved on. And, every time Lewis Hamilton is beat by Russell, they cry that, oh, sabotage, engine settings, setup, all that. Clearly, obviously, Lewis Hamilton is clearly not being beaten by George Russell. It's just clearly being sabotaged by the evil masterminds at Mercedes-Benz. It's all their fault. Clearly, that's what's going on. But yeah, I really hope they reveal the identity of whoever it is, because I guarantee you it is one of those insane fuckers on Twitter. I guarantee you. Yeah, and he's saying I have a voodoo doll version of his tires, and I keep them in my fridge during the race. Will F1 says Hamilton bottled the 2021 championship. I don't think I would say that, but I don't think he was the best driver that season. Wasn't great in 2022, Will says, and second half of 2023 wasn't great, to be honest, so it's not like he's been really great in recent years or anything. Exactly. If you look since the beginning of the ground effect era, yeah, except for the first half of 2023, he's not been the same Lewis Hamilton. Now, I don't know if it's because of what happened in Abu Dhabi, whether it had that much of a mental effect that, he's now just a different driver. Maybe it did. I mean, if that's what it is, I can understand it, because that, losing a championship in that way, that is really hard to take. But the fact of the matter is, Lewis Hamilton is not the Lewis Hamilton at the moment, and he might not be the Lewis Hamilton anymore. This might be the beginning of the end for Lewis Hamilton in Formula One. We'll have to see when he goes to Ferrari next year, but yeah. Silverback says, I think Lewis made up a fake email address and sent it. Well, it wasn't him, because even he, I think, has said that, any claims of sabotage is just complete rubbish. Hamilton got very lucky with red flags at Imola and Silverstone in 2021, says Will. Yeah, I mean, I've said before, whether people think it's controversial or not, I think Max Verstappen was the best driver of 2021, and I think he was the most deserving driver to win the championship that year. But of course, the way he won it was, terrible for the sport. But yeah, like I said, since the beginning of the ground effect era, we have not seen the same Lewis Hamilton. And maybe we'll find out after he's retired why there's been this drop-off. We'll have to see. But keep voting in the poll, by the way, at the top of the live chat. Let me know, who do you think will take pole position in Spain? Will it be Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, George Russell, or Lewis Hamilton? Or maybe anyone else? Let me know in the chat. But I'm just going to hide the countdown for a minute, because I want to go through all of the teams quickly. A bit of a roundup before we get into the session. So Red Bull still not looking as maybe competitive as you would have expected. Still looking a bit weak in certain areas, but still, they are the best team on the grid and they still have the best driver in the world. And by the looks of where, the performance of all the teams are today, it looks like it really could come down to the driver themselves as to who ends up taking pole position. And if that is the case, Red Bull have got a very good case for pole position because, again, Max Verstappen is the best in the world. And lately in qualifying, Max has been, not every session, but a lot of the time has been absolutely on it. So do not count out Max Verstappen and Red Bull. They are still an incredible partnership and can still easily get the job done, even if it is a very close run session. Ferrari looking a bit stronger than expected. I thought they would be clearly third best team or something like that coming into the weekend, but they look like they're right in the fight for pole. They topped practice 3. They were very close to topping practice 2 yesterday. And yeah, look, probably a quarter of a second quicker than we probably would have expected coming into this Grand Prix weekend. So good to see from Ferrari after the awful Canadian Grand Prix in Montreal where they had zero pace, which again was such a shock because going into that weekend, I thought Ferrari, in qualifying at least, in the dry, my expectation was Ferrari would have the quickest car because I thought that track suited them a lot, especially coming out of Monaco where, some tight corners and also with the long straights there. I thought, yeah, Ferrari would be in very good nick, but they were awful. So they need to bounce back here, especially for the Constructors' Championship. Remember, they're only 49 points behind, so they've got to make sure they have a strong session today. And I think, to be honest, I think if they were to end up on pole position, I think they would be pretty surprised by that. I think if they can end up in the top 3, then I think they would be satisfied with that result. Because again, it is going to be super, super close, and you've got some very quick drivers out there that are going to be very hard to beat. Verstappen, Norris, Russell, maybe Lewis Hamilton if he's at his best. So yeah, Ferrari definitely in the mix, but I would say personally less likely to end up on pole than, say, a Red Bull or McLaren. But Mercedes-Benz, of course, since their front wing upgrade in Montreal, they are really back to what they at least should be, competing at the front of the grid. George Russell still looking in pretty good form. Lewis Hamilton has looked decent so far, but we've seen so far this season where Hamilton will look decent, if not good, in practice, and then in qualifying will end up beaten by his teammate and end up with a pretty poor grid position. So hopefully Lewis Hamilton can actually deliver today. Like we know, it is possible, but he hasn't really delivered, enough, if at all, in 2024. So yeah, we'll see what he can do. But Mercedes, absolutely. Let me just clear my throat a second. Mercedes, as I was saying, absolutely can take pole position. They've got the car. The car is handling very well. It's consistently quick in all the sectors, but whether they've got a car absolutely quick enough to take pole ahead of all the others, it's very hard to say, and I would say at the moment, too close to call. And for McLaren, they're looking good, but I still think, as we saw with the sector data from practice 2 yesterday, I still think they can do better. That final sector was a bit lacking compared to what I would have expected coming into the weekend itself. So there's definitely more time on the table there, I think, for McLaren. And sadly, it looks like they've only got really one driver in the fight for pole position. Oscar Piastri just hasn't been on the pace of his teammate at all this weekend, which I don't really understand why, because it's not like Oscar has not really had experience at this track, but clearly just isn't, getting to grips with this circuit as well as Lando, who has looked super, super quick. And of course, remember, Lando Norris finished third in qualifying last year in the McLaren, which, of course, this time last year, that McLaren was a midfield car. So imagine what he could maybe do today in the McLaren. But yeah, McLaren, their hopes when it comes to pole position are all on Lando Norris. And we know the pace is there, but can he deliver the laps when it matters most? Because that has been a bit of an issue for him in the last year or so. Aston Martin, as I said earlier, the more upgrades they put on, the worse they get. They're just not really looking competitive. If Fernando Alonso can somehow drag that car into Q3, that would be great. But they don't look like top 10 runners to me at all. And even for the race, I don't think they're really top 10 runners either. So yeah, Aston Martin in big trouble going into this session. Racing Bulls, like I said earlier, with the upgrades they put on, I think there is more to come from them. So they might be a bit of a surprise in this session, maybe getting a car into Q3. Maybe both cars will get into Q3. We'll have to see. But I think, like I said, there is more in that car. I think maybe another 2 or 3 tenths of a second they can find in the car because, they put on quite a few important upgrades that you would think, if they have improved the car, would show up at a track like this. So, yeah, we'll keep an eye out for Racing Bulls. Definitely a dark horse, as they usually are. Alpine looking very strong in practice 3. They weren't quite going as quick as they were in practice 2, but in practice 2, they looked incredible and clearly the best midfield team, which I think they will maintain in this session. Gasly and Ocon both looking quick as well, which is good for the team. And if they can get a double Q3 appearance, then that would be perfect for Alpine. Williams, quite clearly the slowest team. Sauber, all their hopes are pinned on Valtteri Bottas, who has looked very quick this weekend. And of course, Bottas has always been very quick at this track. Got pole here in 2019, qualified, 6 tenths of a second ahead of Lewis Hamilton that day. So, yeah, all their hopes pinned on him. And if he can't deliver, then Sauber will be in big trouble. And then Haas, they're not top 10 runners, but they could be really anywhere between 11th and 18th. So we'll just have to see where they end up, to be honest. But yeah, a decent car, but not really, again, top 10 material, which is not really a surprise. We never thought this track was going to suit their car. So there you go, guys. Those are the teams. And let me just quickly get the timer back up, as we've got 7 minutes remaining until qualifying begins in Spain. And of course, we'll get on to a couple final things before the session, but make sure to get your final comments in the chat, because of course I'll be going on to the watch-along part of the stream in a second, as Sky F1 is just doing their final ad break before we get into the session itself. And yeah, really, really pumped for this session. And I think this has the potential to be as exciting as what we saw in Canada, maybe even more exciting than what we saw in Canada. And remember, the top, I think, was it the top 4 cars was separated by a tenth of a second? Let's hope it's as close here in Catalonia. Yeah, we'll just read out a couple final comments and then we'll get to this session. Astro says it's hard to tell how good Max really is, given the superiority of his machinery and the inferiority of his teammates. True, but I think still he is the best. I mean, by how much? Again, like you say, it's hard to tell, but I still think he is the best. Will F1 says Leclerc should get a 10-place group penalty, 100% in my opinion. We'll see whether that happens. Stroll, no penalty. Not really surprised at that, if that is true. And yeah, he was only given a reprimand, so yeah, that's no surprise at all. And let me see if I can find one final comment. Actually, from Salvador says, I enjoy your coverage. Thank you very much for that. Much appreciated. But yeah, let's now get into this session. But before we do, just a couple final things. Quickly, a reminder of my prediction for qualifying. I think it will be just about Max Verstappen taking pole position by 0.01 of a second from Lando Norris in second, George Russell third, Sainz fourth, Hamilton fifth, Leclerc sixth, Piastri seventh, Gasly eighth, Ocon ninth, and Bottas in 10th. We'll see if that top 10 does indeed become true. Let's go into some stats, though, regarding the top 4 teams. Max Verstappen took pole, of course, here in Spain last year by a massive margin. I think over half a second it was in the end. Not going to be as dominant this weekend, though. Red Bull, though, have only taken pole in Spain once since 2015, which, of course, was last year. So not a great record for Red Bull. And their last pole position was at Imola. So looking to get back on the pole position trail are Red Bull. For Ferrari, Charles Leclerc, of course, took pole at the 2022 Spanish Grand Prix, one of his best pole positions of his career. Ferrari, though, have also not got a great record in qualifying here in Spain. They've only taken pole in Spain once since 2009, which, of course, was Leclerc in 2022. So, yeah, not a great record. And Ferrari searching for their second pole position in 2024. Of course, Leclerc took pole in Monaco, which led to victory. For Mercedes, they've got a great record here at this circuit. Mercedes' last pole position in Spain was in 2021 with Lewis Hamilton. Mercedes have taken pole 7 times in Spain since 2015. This was always one of their happiest hunting grounds. And Lewis Hamilton looking for his first pole position since Hungary 2023. And for McLaren, also not a great record here at this circuit. The last time they took pole position at the Circuit of Catalonia was in 2005 with Kimi Raikkonen. Yes, 19 years ago. Of course, that weekend, Raikkonen went on to win by 35 seconds. McLaren also have only taken 1 pole position at this circuit since the year 2000. So, just in general, not a great circuit for them historically. And McLaren still looking for their first pole position of 2024. And a final reminder of the championship standings. Max Verstappen leading by 56 points from Charles Leclerc second, Norris in third, Sainz fourth, Perez fifth, Piastri sixth, Russell seventh, Hamilton eighth, Alonso ninth, Yuki Tsunoda in P10. And on the constructors' side, Red Bull are leading and 49 points clear of Ferrari in second, McLaren third, Mercedes 4th, Aston Martin 5th, Racing Bull 6th, Haas 7th, Alpine 8th, Williams 9th, and Sauber last of all. And the session will be underway in a moment. 18 minutes long is Q1. Of course, I'll sync up the timer as usual at the 17-minute mark. But you would think for Q1 that the 2 Williamses are likely to be eliminated, and probably Zhou Guanyu, because, I mean, Zhou has been absolutely diabolical this season. So, those 3 certainly likely, and then maybe we'll get a shock elimination, maybe a Racing Bull car if they can't get their pace together, maybe an Aston Martin over Lance Stroll, or someone like that. We will have to see. But yeah, it's now overcast conditions, so the tyres won't be wearing out as badly over the course of the lap as they were previously. I mean, of course, they still wear out a bit over the lap, given how high speed the track is now with those 2 final corners. But, yeah, should help the tyres a bit. As we're looking at Lando Norris on the TV broadcast in his garage. And looking at George Russell as well. Yeah, around this track, you're not going to be able really to go for more than 1 run. Because again, the tyres will be done after 1 flying lap. Because this circuit absolutely tears tyres apart. as Leclerc looks like he's maybe ready soon to get out there on track. But yeah, Leclerc, you would think, is going to get a grid penalty for what he did in practice 3. So, yeah. Oh, Leclerc has only got a reprimand. Are you... Wow. So, according to the stewards, they say that whilst not being dangerous, that's not true, it was dangerous, it was considered to be erratic and therefore issue a driving reprimand. That is, yeah. And that sets a terrible, as someone just said on Twitter that I just saw, it sets a terrible precedent going forward, because you can guarantee in the future someone will do that in a qualifying session and they'll get probably a harsher penalty, and then chaos will ensue. As there you go, 17 minutes remain in Q1. But I mean, would it be Formula One if the stewards weren't a complete joke? Not sure it would. As we're looking at Zhou Guanyu on the track, who has been maybe not the worst driver in 2024, but definitely one of. He regularly is eliminated in Q1 and also regularly getting eliminated in last place and miles of his teammate. And I don't think anyone can defend this guy anymore. And yeah, has finished 20th in qualifying in 3 of the last 5 qualifying sessions, I think it said there. So yeah, awful season, and Zhou clearly proving that he is not of the Formula One standard. But let's see what he can do with this lap. By the way, the best lap time we've had so far this weekend was a 1:13.0 in practice 3. My expectation is that pole position will be a low 1 minute 12. Maybe at the absolute best a late 1 minute 11. But I think probably a 1:12.0 or a 1:12.1 is what pole position will be. So we'll keep our eyes out for anyone who gets close to that. As Zhou coming through turn 9, which of course is flat out in these cars. And to be honest, it shouldn't be flat out in these cars. It should be way more difficult than that, but that's the issue with these cars. They're too easy to drive. As Ricciardo has gone quicker in the first sector than Zhou. Zhou has a bit of a wiggle through turn 12. Now through the final couple corners. And Zhou Guanyu does a 1:14.3, which is very slow. As Logan Sargent has done the best lap time so far. So Sargent is quickest from Zhou second. Sargent only 0.03 of a second quicker, so not really a ton of difference. As here comes Ricciardo, who does a 1:13.7, which is a decent start, I would say, but obviously we'll need to go quicker. As actually, Yuki Tsunoda, his teammate, goes 0.3 of a second slower than Ricciardo. This is one of, as Lance Stroll now goes second, this is one of Daniel Ricciardo's better tracks. He has had some brilliant races around here. 2014, of course, he I think was the 2014 Spanish Grand Prix might have been his first podium for Red Bull, if I'm correct. I was actually at that Grand Prix where Ricciardo finished, I think, 45 seconds behind the race leader. Mercedes were in a class of 1 at that time. But yeah, Ricciardo was on the podium that day. Obviously, was leading this race in 2016 until he was put on a alternate strategy to his teammate Max Verstappen, who won the race, and the rest is history. Had a podium here in 2017 as well. So this is a bit of a better Daniel Ricciardo track. Of course, I forgot to mention Ricciardo's performance in Canada. What a performance it was. Only a tenth and a half away from pole and ended up, was it 5th on the grid? And finished 8th in the race. Brilliant from Ricciardo. Responding perfectly to Jacques Villeneuve, saying pretty much, what the fuck is this guy doing here? As Carlos Sainz and his teammate are very slowly trundling out of the pit lane, along with an Alpine, a Haas, the Mercedes of Russell. As the drivers that have set a lap time so far already back in the pits. But yeah, if you want to get through to Q2, then I'd say you need to be doing probably a mid, maybe a 1:13.4, I think would be a good time probably to get through to the second part of qualifying. So Ricciardo, pretty good start for him. He's not too far away from that. But yeah, I'd say probably, 13.4 or 13.5 is probably what you want to be doing at least to get through to the second part of qualifying. As we're looking at Carlos Sainz on his outlap. Leclerc's on his outlap out there as well. Very lucky boy is Leclerc. As here is Sergio Perez, normally hopeless in qualifying, but he has done at least a purple middle sector. This isn't a track Perez normally is quick around, but we'll see what he can do with this lap. And Perez does a 1:13.0. So Sergio Perez goes quickest. And really, already, that should be good enough to see him into Q2. The thing with Perez I don't get is, I don't know what it is. I don't know if he's trying too hard, knowing that he's, that obviously Red Bull are not as quick as they used to be. But I think really, especially around a track like this, you need to let the car do the work, because the car itself is easily good enough to be obviously in the top 10. So, yeah. As Max Verstappen does a absolute stonker of a lap time, a 1:12.3. That's only 2 or 3 tenths away from what I think pole position's going to be. That is filthy from Max. A 1:12.3 first lap in qualifying, as Hamilton goes second, 7 tenths away from that time. Have Red Bull shown their true hand? As Lando Norris goes second and does a 1:12.3. So Lando able to get on the similar pace. So it's Verstappen, Norris, Hamilton, Piastri, Perez, Albon. As now Alonso goes up to 6th place. But what a searing pace that is for Q1. As Alonso 6th, Ocon goes up to P7. Not anymore. Valtteri Bottas goes 7th. Still impressing on the Sauber. And then you got Ocon 8th, Albon 9th, Magnussen is 10th, as Charles Leclerc by half a tenth goes quickest on a 1:12.2. Like I said, searing pace in Q1. This is way quicker than I thought we'd be seeing. I thought we'd be seeing maybe a late 1:12 at best. And we're already into the low 1:12s. As Pierre Gasly goes 5th for Alpine. What a lap. And continuing to show the great pace he showed yesterday. So Gasly up to 5th. Not anymore, because Mr. Saturday, George Russell, is now in P5. So it's Leclerc, Verstappen, Norris, Carlos Sainz, by the way. He went up to 4th. So Sainz 4th, and then Russell 5th. Gasly 6th. Hulkenberg is up to 7th as Tsunoda only goes 16th with his new improved lap. That is very poor. So yeah, Hulkenberg 7th, Hamilton 8th, Piastri 9th, Perez 10th, Alonso 11th, and Bottas Stroll now in 13th. Ocon 14th, Albon 15th, and currently in the drop zone, it is Tsunoda, Zhou, Magnussen, Ricciardo, and Sargent with 7.5 minutes to go in Q1. Surely Racing Bulls, can do better than this. And Ricciardo, he can, but not by much. He only goes up to 15th. So yeah, Racing Bulls are struggling by the looks of it, as Logan Sargent's struggling to get his front end into turn 12, looking like a trolley. And gets through the final couple corners and stays in 20th place. But pretty much everyone is now either heading back to the pits or is in the pits. So one final run to go. And yeah, Racing Bulls in trouble. Williams in trouble. No surprise about that. Zhou in trouble. No surprise about that. Magnussen, though, he's looked good compared to his teammate. So I'm a bit surprised he's 19th and Hulkenberg is 7th. But yeah, very impressed by the pace of Leclerc, Verstappen, Norris, Sainz, and Russell, who are all the top 5 separated by 0.2 of a second, and then from Russell to Gasly, you've got 5.5 tenths of a second from 5th to 6th place. So that top 5 on a different planet right now. And maybe we'll see an even quicker pole position time. Maybe a late 1 minute 11 or something. As we're looking at a is it Williams of Alex Albon? Yes, we are. Who is on his out lap before he takes on his final lap. And let's see whether Albon can make Q2. He's made Q3 as Albon in the last 2 races. Last 2 race weekends, Albon has been on fire. Finished 9th in Monaco and 9th in... was it 9th in Monaco? Or it might have been 10th in Monaco. I can't remember. But, yeah. He's been brilliant these last couple races. In a Williams car that refuses to improve. But can he improve on this, what is probably final run? As he bounces down into turn 1. And a bit of oversteer on the exit. And exit turn 2 as well. Rear end clearly not gripping up. And Albon does not improve his first sector. Looks good though through turn 4 and 5. So the middle sector, you would imagine, if he keeps it together, will be a personal best. And through turn 9. Having to lift through turn 9. So that just shows you with the Williams the issues they've got. And it is a personal best middle sector, but he's only 0.07 of a second quicker than Ricciardo after the first 2 sectors. Yeah, Albon, I don't think is going to get through to Q2. And if you're having to lift in turn 9, if you're Williams, then I think that's the clearest sign of what the issue is. Just haven't got enough downforce. As Alex Albon goes up to 12th place, good final sector, but again, I don't think he's going to stay there. As Ricciardo now in the drop zone, but he's on an out lap. Tsunoda and Sargent still in the pits, but they should be out on track soon. 3 minutes to go in Q1. As Sergio Perez is in P10 and is not that far ahead of the cutoff zone, but I'll be honest, I think the lap time he's already done is going to be good enough. I don't think Ricciardo is going to improve by a massive amount, but Perez can at least make sure of his progression to Q2 as Perez heads into turn 1. And like I said, I don't know if lately he's been trying too hard, but he just needs to try and relax and let the car do the work, because the car around this track easily is good enough to be in the top 10. And he's done a good first sector so far. Into turn 5. And, yeah, looks all good. If he keeps it together, this will be a good lap time. So we've got 2 minutes to go now in Q1. Valtteri Bottas improving. Zhou Guanyu improving. Don't know how much by, though, for Zhou, who, of course, is in the drop zone. Perez, quarter of a second down on Leclerc for the first 2 sectors. So Perez is probably going to go up to 6th place with this lap. And Bottas probably going to go up into the top 10 as well, as Zhou is nearly a quarter of a second up on Ocon, who is the driver at risk right now after the first 2 sectors. As here comes Perez. And yet, he does go 6th. And Perez definitely through to Q2. Valtteri Bottas goes 7th. He should be through as well. As Zhou improves up to 8th. Will that be enough? As Ocon here in 16th. Can he improve to get himself out? Surely he can. The car's definitely quick enough. And he does. He goes up to 7th place. As Lewis Hamilton's improving. Hamilton dropping down the order. As Magnussen goes 10th. Will that be enough? As we've got Stroll in the drop zone now. Oscar Piastri improves up to 6th place. As Lewis Hamilton is in a purple middle sector. Comes to the line. And goes quickest by a 10th of a second. Lewis Hamilton through to Q2. And quickest in a 1:12.1. What a lap time that is. As Ricciardo improves only, though, up to 15th. As the 2 Aston Martins now in the drop zone. Can they do anything about that? As Alonso through the final corner, who, of course, has won here twice before. Alonso to the line. And yes, Alonso goes up to 9th. So Daniel Ricciardo is out in Q1 as the checkered flag has now fallen. Pierre Gasly goes 10th. Not a great lap, but probably is through. As here comes Lance Stroll, currently in 18th place. He's not improved his middle sector. Can he make it in? Yes, he can. He goes up to 14th place. As here is Tsunoda in 19th. Will he get through? No, he won't. He only goes 16th. So both Racing Bulls knocked out in Q1. What a shock. As Hulkenberg goes up to 12th and gets himself out of the drop zone. And here comes Logan Sargent, the only man who can knock Lance Stroll out. As Logan to the line. Stays in 20th. So there you go. That is Q1 over and done with. Let's go through the drivers making it through to Q2. Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, Carlos Sainz, George Russell, Oscar Piastri, Sergio Perez, Fernando Alonso, Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon, Nico Hulkenberg, Valtteri Bottas, Zhou Guanyu, Lance Stroll, and knocked out in Q1, Kevin Magnussen, Yuki Tsunoda, Daniel Ricciardo, Alex Albon, and Logan Sargent. Very bad session for Racing Bulls, especially when they're trying to catch Aston Martin 30 points ahead of them in the championship. So yeah, not good. But there is always tomorrow. But Q2 will be underway in a couple minutes. And of course, there's a 15-minute long session. I'll sync up the timer at the 14-minute mark. And let me just get the other... There you go. Graphics. So, of course, anyone in between the two dotted lines, 11th to 15th at the end of Q2, will be out in those positions. Nib says Racing Bull's got a DRS issue of some sort. Well, yeah, that if they weren't able to do it down the pit straight, that would have been an issue. Because it can cost you, half a second, if not more, down the pit straight. But just looking on Twitter to see if there's any news I can find, and no. There was news earlier. There was a small fire at the McLaren hospitality area, but it looks as though it's all fine, no issues. But Will says, first Williams back row since Abu Dhabi 2022. That's quite remarkable that it's been that long, given Williams, still haven't been a super competitive team all of the time. But, yeah. No real surprise there. And maybe with Kevin Magnussen's form, you can say no real surprise about him being eliminated. But yeah, the two Racing Bulls, that is very bad. But at least for Ricciardo, when it comes to his own performance, at least, you can say that it's the car rather than himself being the issue. But, yeah, in Q2, the drivers we're looking out for that maybe could be eliminated. I think Sergio Perez, of course, has got to be someone you've got to think of as a possible elimination. Of course, the two Aston Martins have got to be up for maybe getting eliminated. I'd be very surprised if Aston Martin got both cars into Q3. As Logan Sargent on the radio, don't know what he's saying, but probably complaining. But nothing he can do. The Williams car is the slowest, and he is the slowest on the grid. So, no shock. He's at the back. And what's funny with Logan is this weekend is, I think, the first weekend since, is it Bahrain or Saudi Arabia, where both Albon and Logan have the same amount of parts, same exact parts. Of course, since that Australian crash, they've been really struggling when it comes to that. But still, Logan, 3 tenths behind, 4 tenths behind. So it just shows you it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if Logan has the same amount of parts or more parts. It doesn't matter. Logan can never beat Alex Albon. It can never happen. Which is why Logan will not be on the grid for that much longer. As Anthony Davidson doing some Sky pad analysis of understeer at turn 10. But yeah, best lap time in Q1 was a 1:12.1. Will they go quicker than that? If they can get straight into the 1 minute 11s, I would be very impressed with that. But as we normally see at the start of Q2, they do tend to go out on a scrubbed set of tyres. So we're probably going to see lap times drop off into, I don't know, maybe the mid 1 minute 12s. And then maybe we'll see a lap time equaling what we saw in Q1 by the end of the session. But yeah, we could very well see a late 1 minute 11 for pole position, which is incredibly quick. Because let me just see what pole position was last year. And last year's pole position was a 1:12.9. 28.2. So, I mean, Lewis Hamilton went, what, a tenth and a half quicker than that already? So maybe we are on for some incredible pole position time, we'll have to see. And as well, if you, as the session has begun, I'll sync the timer up in a moment. If you haven't voted in the poll yet regarding who you think will take pole, let me know in that poll over the course of the next, 20 minutes? And yeah, in about 25 minutes, I'll finish the poll before we get into the meat of this session. As that's an Aston Martin coming out to track of, I think, Fernando Alonso. And yeah, it's gone very dull weather-wise at the track. Maybe a sign of the weather coming for tomorrow morning. As there you go, 14 minutes remain in Q2. But we had similar weather for obviously the qualifying and race last year. So yeah, it's not really different compared to last year. So as there is Carlos Sainz, who of course qualified and started on the front on the front row for this race last year, but only ended up finishing in P5. And there is George Russell in the Mercedes garage, still not coming out quite yet. And Pierre Gasly, who's got to be one of the drivers to look out for in this rest of the session, really. As Nico Hulkenberg also still sat in the garage. So not a lot of action on the track right now. Again, we've got an Aston Martin out there. Don't know if we've got anyone else out there. But, yeah. And it's Lance Stroll we're looking at on board as he begins his first Q2 attempt. And yeah, you're going to have to be firmly in the 1 minute 12s if you're going to get into Q3. So let's see what Stroll does. He's never really been that quick at this track. He's had a lot of, not great performances. I mean, last year he did out qualify and out race Alonso, which was probably one of his best weekends. But again, most of the time at this track, he's not really that competitive, except for, again, last year and also 2020. He, I think, qualified 4th, was it? And finished, I think, 4th. A Racing Point. Stroll, obviously purple sectors because he's the first one to do a time. Let's see how good it is. And it's a 1:13.6, which is dreadful. And I hope, for Lance Stroll's sake, that is a scrubbed set of tyres, because that is diabolical. As everyone else is now coming out onto the track. And we'll see how much better they can do than Lance Stroll. Surely quite a bit better. Especially the front runners. As they tiptoe on their outlap. Obviously wanting to protect the tyres as much as they can. Like, obviously they used to do back in the 80s. As, yeah, very slow coming out the pit lane are all these cars. Backing off or backing up as much as possible. As the two Saubers come out onto track. Good to see the two Saubers in Q2. It's been quite a while since we've seen the two of them in Q2, as they are obviously stuck at the bottom of the championship. As Lance Stroll already back in the pits. As, yeah, the driver's really slow coming out onto track. Which is frustrating. But it has to be done because, again, you don't want to cost yourself an extra couple tenths of a second because you've added, extra wear to the compound. As here is Esteban Ocon going for a lap time. Sergio Perez also on a lap. As Ocon goes nearly 0.3 of a second quicker than Stroll in the first sector. Incredible start for Ocon. Perez 0.5 tenth quicker than Ocon. Yeah, that was a very poor lap time from Stroll. As Ocon, who, as much as I can remember, has always been in the top 10 here in Barcelona. As Ocon, good middle sector. If he can have a good final sector, this will be a good first lap time for Q2. And he's going slower than Perez behind, but Perez is only maybe 1/10 quicker. So yeah, this is a good time for Esteban Ocon, who comes to the line and does a 1:12.3. That is a very good first lap time in Q2. As Sergio Perez, only goes 1/10 quicker onto a 1:12.2. So the proper front runners, I think, are going to get into the 1:11s quite clearly. As Pierre Gasly has done a purple middle sector. What's his lap time? It's a 1:12.1, and he goes quickest out of the 4 drivers that have done a time so far. So, yeah. 2 Alpines, I think, have done some really good times there. Hulkenberg, though, goes ahead of Ocon up to 3rd. As here comes Alonso. He's not done any purple sectors, Alonso, and only does a 1:12.5. Aston Martin in trouble as Valtteri Bottas goes ahead of Alonso, just confirming that they're in trouble. As Zhou goes up to 8th place. Here comes Leclerc, who only goes quickest by 1/10.5 over Gasly to a 1:12.0. So Leclerc quickest. Carlos Sainz has done a purple first and second sector. Piastri now goes quickest for McLaren. As Carlos Sainz now goes 1/10.5 quicker and does a 1:11.8. Lando Norris now comes to the line. And he goes quickest by 0.02 of a second. That is how close it is in Formula 1 right now. Here comes Max Verstappen, who goes 0.2 of a second quicker, showing that he's got still some very strong pace in the bag. So Max Verstappen quickest on a 1:11.6. As Hamilton only does a 1:12.6 and is down in P12. Russell does a 1:12.1 and is only 6th. So Mercedes in quite a bit of trouble there. But it is Verstappen, Norris, Sainz in 3rd. And then Piastri 4th. Leclerc 5th. Russell 6th. Gasly 7th, Perez 8th, Hulkenberg 9th, Ocon 10th. Lewis on the radio saying this tyre was bad. And then in the drop zone, it is Bottas, Alonso, Hamilton, Stroll, and Zhou. Surely Hamilton is not going to get knocked out in Q2. that would be, yeah. I think really that if that was to happen, that would really sum up 2024 for Lewis Hamilton. As he comes back into the pits, and I don't know if he was on a fresh tyre that time around. I'm going to assume not. But hopefully with a fresh set of tyres, he can get out there and bang in the lap time at least that he did in Q1, which would see him about where his teammate is, and would see him get through definitely to Q3. As we're looking at Lance Stroll, who I think is just starting a new flying lap with just over 4 minutes to go in Q2. Can Stroll make Q3? I don't think he can, unless this is a gigantic improvement. He's 1.2 seconds away from Ocon in 10th. Good start to the lap. Slightly quicker than Ocon, but that first sector, the least important part of the track. Stroll through turns 7 and 8. Car looks fine. Nothing special. And middle sector is up on Ocon by half a tenth. But even if he gets into like 9th place, I don't think he's going to stay there, because I think everyone below him can definitely go a bit quicker. As here comes Stroll into the final corner. And Lance Stroll does go 10th by 4 thousandths of a second ahead of Esteban Ocon. But yeah, Stroll is not going to make Q3. No way. Because Ocon, Bottas, Alonso and Hamilton, I'm pretty sure, can go quicker. As Lewis Hamilton already back out there on an outlap. And so is Ocon, Bottas, Alonso, Zhou, Gasly, Perez, Hulkenberg. Top 6, though, at the minute, are remaining in the pits. As we're looking at Lewis Hamilton, who's coming towards the end of his outlap. And yeah, just needs to keep it together, let the car do the work, and surely will make it through to the third part of qualifying. As Lewis into the final couple corners he comes. And now into the final corner. And Lewis Hamilton begins his final attempt at making Q3. Surely he will. As Lewis Hamilton into turn 1. Car looks good through there. And obviously flat through turn 3. And yeah, very good first sector. Nearly 2 tenths up on Stroll, who is the driver at risk in P10. And yeah, this should be good enough for Hamilton to get through. Looking at the way the lap is developing, he passes a couple slow cars, or one slow car. And yeah, 3.5 tenths up on Stroll after the first 2 sectors. As the Aston Martin there gets out of the way. Don't know what Aston Martin it was. As Ocon is on a flying lap. And here comes Lewis Hamilton through the final corner. And Lewis Hamilton goes second. Massive improvement in that final sector. And Lewis Hamilton is definitely through to Q3. Valtteri Bottas up to 9th. As Zhou Guanyu stays 15th. No surprise there. Hulkenberg does not improve his middle sector. Ocon has improved for his first and second sector. Surely Ocon can get through. Yes, he can. He goes up to P7, but will it stay that way? As his teammate is going quick behind. Hulkenberg stays in P12. He is out in Q2. Perez now in the drop zone, along with the two Aston Martins. Of course, Lance Stroll is out. Pierre Gasly to the line. And he goes up to P7. I think definitely one of the Alpines is going to make Q3. Sergio Perez goes 7th. Perez is surely through. As Alonso in 14th. Trying as hard as possible to make it through. As George Russell in P10 is in the purple first sector. Valtteri Bottas is out of Q2 in 11th. So Alonso the only one that can get out. And he does not. He misses out by 0.014 of a second. George Russell goes up to 3rd. And both Aston Martins are out in Q2. So let's go through the drivers that have made it through to the almighty shootout here in Catalonia, Q3. Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, George Russell, Lando Norris, Carlos Sainz, Oscar Piastri, Charles Leclerc, Sergio Perez, Pierre Gasly, and Esteban Ocon. Well done to the two Alpines for getting through. And knocked out in Q2, Fernando Alonso, Valtteri Bottas, Nico Hülkenberg, Lance Stroll, and Zhou Guanyu. And Q3 we're underway in about, 5 minutes or so? But, and obviously I'll sync it up at the 11-minute mark of Q3. But, yeah. I think with Aston Martin, you have to say, as expected, they've not looked quick all weekend. They just haven't been on the pace. So we can't really sit and be surprised. Valtteri Bottas in 12th. I think Bottas did the best he could. With Sergio Perez, performing a lot more, or maybe not a lot more, a bit more to the level he should be, I think, that really was going to make it very difficult for Bottas to get through. So yeah, Bottas did the best he could. Hülkenberg 13th, again, best really he could do. Stroll 14th, no surprise, and no surprise with Zhou. But yeah, Aston Martin are a midfield team, quite clearly. And at the moment, Alpine, I think, look about on their level, and this weekend are quicker. So Aston Martin are in big trouble going forward. And Alpine, like I say, they are the team to look out for in the second half of the season. Because remember, at the end of this month, after the Austrian Grand Prix next Sunday, the development table in terms of who is allowed to develop the most in the wind tunnel and who is allowed to develop the least will reset. And Alpine are, 8th in the championship, so they'll have quite a bit more time than Aston Martin in the wind tunnel in the second half of the season. So Alpine might be able to hunt after Aston Martin. So yeah, just a few minutes away. But in terms of the fight for pole, I mean, nobody could get close to Max Verstappen there. 2 tenths quicker than Norris and Sainz, and Piastri and Leclerc quite a bit down. And Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, they did a second run in Q2 when Max did not, and were still not able to get on the same pace as Max. So has that shown what is going to happen in Q3, that Max and Red Bull have got the best pace? I hope not, but I think we may have just seen the hand of Red Bull having been shown, because that was very impressive from Max and Red Bull. As Anthony Davidson just going through some onboard replays of some of the drivers who got eliminated. Hülkenberg having a bit of a struggle around turn 10 and 12. But Haas were never really going to be competitive here. I do think, though, next week in Austria, I do think they're going to be strong, because that track should suit their car a lot. Obviously, long straights and some slower corners here and there. So, yeah, Haas will be back to being a bit more competitive, definitely, next week. And one thing I can announce for sure, 100%, is I will be live next Saturday, pretty much at the same time, to do the qualifying watch along for the Austrian Grand Prix of 2024. That is a guarantee. And the reason is because obviously the lap is so short at the Red Bull Ring, and it is always qualifying so exciting at that track. And given how close it is right now in Formula One, is a guaranteed. It's going to be a guaranteed exciting session. So, like I said, 100%. I will be live next Saturday at the same time, 1:30 p.m. UK time, for the Austrian Grand Prix qualifying watch along. Make sure to join me for that. In regards to whether I'll be live tomorrow, it all depends on this Q3 session coming up. If Max gets pole, then I won't be live tomorrow. But if anyone else can, then I will. But let me finish up the poll in the chat. Make sure as well, if you haven't hit the like button yet, make sure to do so. We're on 46 likes. Let's try and get up to 50 plus likes if we can by the end of the stream. And yeah, let me finish up this poll quickly in the chat. And hopefully the results will appear in the chat in a moment once it updates. There you go. So thank you guys for voting. 201 votes. And I asked you guys who will take pole position for the 2024 Spanish Grand Prix. And 49% of you voted for Max Verstappen. No surprise, I agree. Lando Norris was second with 23% of the vote. Just behind was Lewis Hamilton on 22% and George Russell fourth on 4%. But yeah, I'm pretty sure. I think Max Verstappen, I think as long as he delivers the best of what he can do, I think it'll be enough for pole. Because I think that Red Bull car and him is just too good of a combination, I'm afraid. But I hope I am proved wrong. I'd love to be. Maybe this team, McLaren, maybe they can do something about Red Bull. They also still look pretty competitive. As McLaren patiently waiting in the garage. And everyone patiently waiting as the session has now begun. I'll sync up the timer in about a minute or so. As Sergio Perez is going to be the first on track. And, right, well, what do we expect pole position to be? I mean, Max Verstappen did a 111.6 in Q2, so maybe a 111.2, 111.3 in this part of qualifying. We'll see. As Max Verstappen about to be released onto the track to set his first attempt at pole. As the Ferraris are released from the garage. Ferrari still looking competitive, but more so on the back foot. As there you go. 11 minutes to go in qualifying in Spain. The pole position record, in terms of the ratio from pole to win, is very high at this track. The winner of the 2023, 2021, 2020, 2018, 2017 races, in recent history, all took pole here. And if you go back even further, again, the record of winning from pole at this track is very strong. So this is, without a doubt, one of the most important pole positions of the year. As Leclerc is just slowly coming out of his garage. As Sergio Perez, we're looking at. What can he do? Can he get in the mix? Probably not. He looks like he's probably going to end up in 8th place today. But let's see what he can do. As he does a 21.7 for the first sector. As Perez through the middle part of the lap. Looking absolutely fine, but whether it's quick or not, who knows? I don't think it is really going to be that quick from Perez. As a Ferrari there was going off the track to get out of the way of Sergio Perez on the approach to turn 12. As Max Verstappen has started his first attempt at pole in Spain. As Sergio Perez to the line only does a 1:13.0. That is a really bad lap time. That will see him in 10th place if he doesn't get his act together. But Max already 0.2 up in the first sector on Perez. And through the middle sector. And Carlos Sainz, 0.2 of a second quicker than Max in the first sector alone. Brilliant from the Spaniard. As Max, 8.5 up on Perez through the middle sector. What will Carlos Sainz be like? As Max through turn 12. Bit of a wiggle on the exit. Not sure this has been the greatest lap for Max Verstappen as he comes through the final corner. And Carlos Sainz are doing about the same middle sector time. And Max Verstappen equals his best lap time in Q2, a 1:11.6. Can the others beat that? Maybe they can. Esteban Ocon now goes up to second place. Carlos Sainz doesn't have a good end to the lap and only ends up second, a quarter of a second away, despite having such a good first sector. Piastri now third. And then you got Ocon fourth ahead of Perez, only by 0.016 of a second. Lando Norris, purple, middle sector. Just needs to get the final sector right, and he'll be on provisional pole. Will the Brit through the final couple corners as Gasly goes fourth. Lando Norris, he goes second. It's not quite good enough in the final sector. He's a 10th and a bit away from Max Verstappen. Here comes Charles Leclerc. Only fourth behind his teammate. And now we wait for the two Mercedes drivers who have not done any purple sectors. But here comes Lewis Hamilton to the line. Third for Hamilton. Where does Russell go? Fourth. So third and fourth for Mercedes, which, to be honest, I think they'd be happy with. But there you go. The first run's complete as Oscar Piastri has had his lap time deleted for a track limit violation. So Piastri down to 10th. So Max Verstappen, with 6 minutes to go in qualifying, is on provisional pole, but has only done a lap time as good, if not slightly slower, than what he did in Q2. So Max can go quicker. There is no doubt about that. But the others cannot get, cannot get within a 10th of Max. So does that tell us that Max is just too far out of reach for today? That might be what we're seeing. But it is Max currently on pole, Norris second, Hamilton third, Russell fourth, Sainz fifth, Leclerc sixth, Gasly seventh, Ocon eighth, Perez ninth, Piastri 10th. And in terms of where Ferrari are at, that's about what I expected them to be in terms of their pace and position coming into the weekend. So sad to see that Ferrari don't really have as much pace as maybe they were hoping with their upgrades. But again, there is still one final run to go. One final chance. As Russell saying on the radio, what the fuck was Lewis doing prepping that lap? And his engineer says he just, it's fine, we'll talk about it afterwards, head in the game. No idea, but Russell only slightly slower than his teammate, so, you know, he's not in a terrible position. He's in fourth place. But he was saying, Russell, after Canada, that now he knows he has a car to fight with. He is absolutely going for it. So he is desperate for another pole position. But at the minute, you'd have to say, given that Max, we know, can go quicker, I think Max is the clear favourite here to take pole position. As Oscar Piastri, who had his lap time deleted, looked like he is going to be first to come back out on the track, which is a shame because he won't have as good a... the track won't be in as good a condition for his lap. But he was, Oscar, in 6th, I think, or was it 7th? Something like that, before the deletion. So maybe he can pop himself up into the top 5. But like I said, as all the cars now coming out on track, Oscar is struggling compared to Lando this weekend. Just doesn't have the same pace. He's about a quarter of a second away. But we will now find out who will take the all-important pole in Spain. Can that man on the TV broadcast, Lando Norris, find that extra couple tenths of a second to take pole in Spain and take McLaren's first pole of this track in 19 years? And can Max take his second pole in a row? First pole it would be since Imola. As the Ferraris are out there, the only cars still in the pits are the 2 Mercedes cars, who want to benefit from the having the best grip at the end. But pretty much everyone is now on the track on an outlap, as Mercedes are holding Russell here a bit, because I haven't seen Russell come out of the pits. As Sergio Perez has just started his final run. And Russell still hasn't left the pit lane. As Piastri begins his final qualifying attempt. And yeah, Russell just exiting the pit lane now, thankfully. Here comes Piastri. Can he get himself into the mix? I think if he can put himself ahead of the 2 Ferraris, I think that probably is the best he can do with this lap. But it's going to be difficult still, as he does a good first sector. And for Max, when he does his lap, that's the sector really he needs to improve. It's the first sector if he's going to hold on to pole, because that first sector was quite poor. That's Piastri through turn 8, now through turn 9, flat, and Piastri only a tenth, just over a tenth behind Max after the first 2 sectors. This is a very good lap. This might put him 3rd or 4th, as Carlos Sainz does not improve his first sector. As Piastri goes too wide, puts it in the gravel, and Piastri is going to end up in 10th. Awful mistake, just slid wide. What I was going to say with Sainz is he's not improved his first sector and gone 3/10 slower in the first sector than he did before. Still quicker than Max in the first sector. But let's see the middle sector. Well, it's up on Max by 0.07 of a second. As Perez goes 7th. Ocon goes ahead of Gasly up to 8th. Leclerc does a good middle sector. Can Ferrari take pole in Spain? Let's find out. Through the final corner, the Spaniard Carlos Sainz to the line. It's second. He misses out by 600ths of a second. What can Leclerc do? Leclerc only second as well, half a tenth off. So close, yet so far. As Max Verstappen has done a purple middle sector and comes through the final couple corners. Is Max going to take pole for the second year running? To the line! He goes nearly 3 tenths quicker, and it's a 1:11.403. But Lando Norris a tenth up in the middle sector. He has got to pull off this final sector, because if he does, he'll take pole in Barcelona as Gasly goes 7th ahead of Perez. What a lap by him. Lando Norris round the final corner to the line. And he's done it by 0.02 of a second. Lando Norris is on provisional pole. Lewis Hamilton goes 3rd. And George Russell ends up in 4th. But it is Lando Norris who takes McLaren's first pole in Catalonia in 19 years. Lando Norris pulls out an absolute stonker of a lap and takes McLaren's and his first pole of 2024. And if he has any designs on winning the championship, then that's exactly right there what he needs to do. So Lando Norris on pole for the Spanish Grand Prix. Max Verstappen 2nd, Lewis Hamilton 3rd, Russell 4th, Leclerc 5th, Sainz 6th, Gasly 7th, Perez 8th, Ocon 9th, Piastri 10th, and then it'll be Alonso 11th, Bottas 12th, Hülkenberg 13th, Stroll 14th, Zhou 15th, Magnussen 16th, Tsunoda 17th, Ricciardo 18th, Albon 19th, and Logan Sargent in 20th. But there you go. McLaren on pole. And yes, that does mean I will be live tomorrow for the race. Because now we've got a proper race on our hands between McLaren and Red Bull and Lando Norris and Max Verstappen, who you have to say, Verstappen and Norris are the 2 best drivers in the world right now. Good result for Hamilton, though. 3rd on the grid, out-qualifying his teammate. Good to see him back more so towards his best. But yeah, fantastic lap by Lando. And yeah, 3rd on the grid he was here last year in a midfield McLaren. This year, snatches pole. And it was that middle sector. That's what decided it. And we saw it in practice too yesterday. The McLaren in the middle sector, so competitive. And that is what did it, because he still ended up losing about a tenth of a second to Max in the final sector. But the middle sector was so good, it didn't matter. But yeah, just to confirm, Astro and everyone, yes, I will be live tomorrow for the race watch-along. I will be live at 12 p.m. UK time, 2 hours before the race. And Nib saying, unsure if I'll be on tomorrow, been sick last few days. If you can't come on, it's absolutely fine. No worries. But let me just quickly start up this poll. Who is your driver of the day for qualifying in Spain? And your options for driver of the day will be Lando Norris, Max Verstappen I'll throw in there, Lewis Hamilton I'll throw in there, and Pierre Gasly deserves a mention. But for me, it is clear who driver of the day is. It is Lando Norris. No doubt about that. But there you go. Let me know who you think driver of the day is or was. But yeah, can't wait for the race tomorrow, because McLaren and Red Bull, if you look at the race pace data, Red Bull their average lap time was, I think, a one. Oh, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was a couple tenths of a second better than McLaren's best average time in the long runs. But McLaren did their long run on the soft compound tyre. So you would imagine if they did it on the medium, which is the better race tyre, then they could maybe be about equal with Red Bull. So if Lando can hold the lead tomorrow at into turn one, there's no reason why Lando can't win tomorrow, because it is still difficult to overtake at this track. But yeah, it is going to be a very close fight, without doubt, between Norris and Verstappen. I don't think Mercedes or Ferrari are going to be able to get in that fight. I just think they're a bit too far away to be able to fight with McLaren and Red Bull. So I think you'll probably see Mercedes versus Ferrari for the podium, and then obviously the midfield fight. So yeah, some good fights we'll see tomorrow, and I can't wait to cover it. Nib saying driver of the day is the win that blew Piastri off the circuit. Say Regara says Lewis Hamilton, driver of the day. Astro says Alpine improved team of the day, did not expect. Well, I mean, they showed it in practice that that this pace was possible. So it's not a surprise, but it's still a brilliant day nonetheless. Silverback saying Gasly had a great run. He did. 7th on the grid. That is Alpine's best qualifying result of the season, I'm pretty sure. I think Monaco, they were, was it 8th or 9th, something like that. So, yeah. Very good. And you'd think Alpine are probably going to end up winning that midfield scrap tomorrow, because they've looked very good all weekend, and they've got some pretty decent race pace as well. But, yeah. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant session. I was really hoping with Lando that he was going to be able to get that pole, because that middle sector was so good. I thought, but that final sector, we've seen it all weekend. McLaren just lacking a bit in that final sector, and I was thinking, will that middle sector be enough to get him pole? And it just about was. Yeah, brilliant lap from Lando. And people may find what I said controversial, but I think it's true. I think Max Verstappen and Lando Norris are the two best drivers in the world right now. I don't think that is. Honestly, I don't really think that's up for debate. Leclerc is still a bit too inconsistent. He's been better this year, Leclerc, than last year, but still not as consistent as Lando. And obviously Max, championship leader, and still amazing. But Lando he's been brilliant this year. And Lando was what? 6th in Bahrain. Didn't have a great race in Saudi Arabia, but then after that, he's been not perfect, because obviously he had Monaco where Piastri out-qualified him, but he's done really as well as he could have done. 3rd was it in Melbourne. I think 2nd in China, obviously 1 in Miami, 2nd at Imola, 4th in Monaco, 2nd in Canada. That's pretty much as well as he could have done, since that Australian Grand Prix. So yeah, I'd say definitely outside of Max, Lando is the best of the rest right now, and thoroughly deserves pole position. And should be a good fight between Norris and Verstappen. Nib saying respect Joseph Newgarden, he would own that fraud Pando bar. Um, Astro says, don't know how to rate Max. He hasn't faced enough challenges and serious tests yet. Put him in a rubbish car with a decent teammate. And we'll see. I mean, well, the Toro Rosso he was in nearly 10 years ago, it wasn't a rubbish car, but I mean, it was a midfield car, and he had a good teammate, and I think we saw just how good he was. Dominated Carlos Sainz. So, yeah. Max is still the best driver in the world. There is no doubt about that. The thing that separates Max compared to the rest is, it's not just, speed, talent, it's consistency. And really, you could say that's what separates the absolute best drivers in general, is consistency. And Max and Lando are the two most consistent drivers in Formula One. So, right now. So, yeah. And Max, is still the best, you'd have to say. Lando, the better man today, but whether he will be tomorrow, we will find out. Hopefully Lando is prepared to get his elbows out and be strong in defence. Because Max, he, as we've seen before on the first lap of a Spanish Grand Prix, he will just go for it. He ain't gonna sit back because he knows that it is hard to overtake at this track. Another thing, to think of though is, even if Max doesn't overtake Lando on the first lap, if Max remains in second place, obviously Red Bull have got the straight line speed advantage. So as long as Max can remain within a second, he's always going to be there right on Lando's tail. So McLaren are going to have to really be at their absolute best tomorrow if they're going to beat Verstappen and Red Bull. But let me read out final few comments and then I will come to the end of the stream. But like I said, I will be live tomorrow. Again, reminder, I will be live at 12 p.m. UK time. That's 2 hours before the race begins. For the race watch along, we'll go through, the usual build up to the race and then watch along the race itself. And maybe we'll get some rain as well. Elamane says, good to see Hamilton Mercedes up front. It is. Good to see you back, sir. Thank you very much for that. Crystal Racing says, can Sauber do something at last? They're not going to do anything until Audi properly take over the team. Let's be honest. But let me see if I can find any other comments. Yeah, earlier Vince just saying, nice one, Lando. Perez, awful session again. Being split by the two Alpines. And let me just have a look to see if I can find what the lap time difference was in the end. Yeah, let me just have a look. I know Hamilton in third was 0.3 away from pole. And Perez ended up 6.5 of a second slower than his teammate. That is, as I've said before, that is nowhere near good enough. Perez, given the gap between Max and Lewis, Perez should be third. Maybe fourth, maybe fifth, you could say. But I think if Perez is performing at his absolute best, I think Perez should be third on the grid. But he's not. And remember, it's a short lap, so to be 6.5 of a second slower around a 71-second lap is pretty bad. Looney Classic says Red Bull might end the season not being the fastest anymore. It is possible. I mean, McLaren still developing very strongly. McLaren, I think I've got big hopes for the next big upgrade, which is probably going to come at Silverstone or something like that. So, yeah, And, you know, maybe if McLaren do assert themselves as the fastest team in the second half of the season, if Lando keeps up his consistency, maybe Lando can have a go for the championship, because Lando is 63 points behind Max, which, I mean, is quite a bit, but if he keeps the consistency up and he, beats Max most times, then it's going to give himself an opportunity. And remember, in two of the last four races, Lando has beaten Max. Obviously, Miami and Monaco. So if McLaren can just find an extra 2 to 3 tenths of a second, then that might be enough to put Lando in a position where he can win the championship. Or not win the championship, but, hunt down Max and fight for it. But we will see whether that does happen. But let me finish up this poll in the chat quickly, because there is a clear winner. And thank you guys, by the way, for coming along. Been great to have you along. And I've asked you guys, who is your driver of the day for qualifying in Spain? 28 votes, 60% of the votes gone to Lando Norris, and I agree. 17% to Max Verstappen, 10% to Lewis Hamilton, and also 10% to Pierre Gasly. But yeah, that's been it for qualifying, guys. And like I said, because of what's happened today, I will be back tomorrow, 2 hours before the race gets going at 12 p.m. UK time, for the race watch along for the Spanish Grand Prix of 2024. Make sure to join me for it. It's going to be, I think, definitely a good race. Plenty of fights throughout the field, again, for the win, for the podium. Obviously, certain cars coming through the field who are a bit quicker. Perez, Piastri. So, yeah, I think we are in for a good race tomorrow. So make sure to join me for it. Before you go, make sure to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. Of course, we continue to provide as much content as we can here on the channel. And as well, make sure to join the Discord server. Link below in the description if you want to join our Discord. And also, link to my Lance Stroll video, which was very popular towards the end of last year. If you haven't seen that, make sure to go click on that and give it a watch. It's only, I think, 20 minutes long? So yeah, make sure to give that a watch if you haven't seen it yet. But guys, until 12 p.m. UK time tomorrow, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.